Hiya lovelies and welcome to book club, specifically Shadowhunters book club. So I am doing a Shadowhunters reread. I know a lot of different people read in different ways. Some do chronological, some do publishing order. I read in publishing order the original time around. I started when I was like 10 or 11 in anticipation of the City of Bones movie. So it's definitely been a minute since I've read them. We are reading in the suggested reading order. This is the order suggested by Simon Teen, and we are currently on our third reading vlog of this. So if you haven't seen the first two, I'll leave a little card to go to them. This will be a spoiler-filled vlog. Those are all spoiler-filled vlogs. So if you haven't read this series, if you don't want to be spoiled for anything, maybe click away now, maybe go read and then come back. We're doing this spoiler-filled because, as I said, I've already read these before. I want to see what I pick up on that I didn't before. I want to see foreshadowing that I didn't notice before. I want to see aspects of character development that I can comment on, knowing how the character evolves later down the line. So when I say it's spoiler-filled, it's not just spoiler-filled for the specific books in this one, but it's kind of spoiler-filled for the whole series because I'm looking at it contextually in what I remember. Now, this reading vlog, like I say, is the third reading vlog, so we are looking at the second half of the Mortal Instruments series. This is City of Fallen Angels, City of Lost Souls, and City of Heavenly Fire. We are starting here with City of Fallen Angels. This is book 4 in the Mortal Instruments. We have just had Valentine's defeat. We've just officially found out that Clary and Jace are not related. I will say, and I said this many times in the first Mortal Instruments vlog, it is not incest. We know it's not incest, and it's seeded that it's not incest in how Clary reacts to Jace versus her other brother, who is Jonathan/Sebastian. Clary and Jace are doing their thing. Simon and Izzy is yet to come. Alec kissed Magnus in the Accords Hall in front of a whole society of Shadowhunters. We read the Red Scrolls of Magic, which fits in, I think in the start of this book, we see Alec going away on holiday with Magnus. That is that trip. So we've already read that ahead of this one. We come back to them when everything feels settled and fine, with some unanswered questions. Obviously, all hell will break loose. No prologue this time around, straight into chapter 1. Interesting. Our part 1 is called Exterminating Angels. I'll be honest, I remember a lot of the general overall story arc of this last trilogy, but individually what happens in City of Fallen Angels versus City of Lost Souls gets a bit, let's say, murky in my brain. What probably happened is I got overexcited and read through them far too quickly when I was far too young and didn't actually process anything other than the main plot points. So we're going to actually see what we do in terms of development and writing and all of those fun things. PSA to the Simon Lewises of the world: if you are dating girls in any kind of serious capacity and there's multiple of them, maybe let them know that. Camille, hi, how are you? It's only been over 100 years / 4 days since I last saw you. I love just any description of Magnus, because obviously this is the bit that we fill in with the Red Scrolls of Magic, which is Alec and Magnus's romantic European trip that got a bit interrupted by a demon-worshipping cult that Magnus founded as a drunk joke. Anyway, talking about the pictures that Jace has been sent. Alec and Magnus standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, Alec wearing jeans as usual, and Magnus wearing a striped fisherman's sweater, leather pants, and an insane beret. In the Boboli Gardens, Alec was still wearing jeans and Magnus was wearing an enormous Venetian cloak and a gondolier's hat. This is the level of dramatic I aspire to, honestly. I just need to channel Magnus Bane. That is what I need to do. My ability to breathe is getting more inhibited the longer the day goes on. We are at chapter 7, which is page 145 of City of Fallen Angels. I'm feeling like Angel with a Shotgun is the song I keep replaying so far in this, but we will see how that goes. Now, we are dealing with the fallout of City of Glass a little bit. Obviously, we see Jace and Clary are together. Simon is juggling 2 girls, Izzy and Maya. The first thing I realised in the opening scene, Simon is on a date with Izzy and Camille's human subjugates come and retrieve Simon. He tells Izzy that she is the first person he will call. Who does he actually call? Clary. Where is she? At the Institute. Who quickly finds out that Clary has been called by Simon? Izzy. Bad move. And let's face it, there's an impending wedding that they're all about to attend. Like, Simon, your time is running out. Just fess up, please. Simon's mother's found out about him being a vampire. He's now dealing with actually what it means to be a vampire, to be a daylighter, and to have the mark of Cain upon his forehead. And we're seeing some more Simon and Jace bonding. Now we see that Jace is kind of going through it. He's a little bit withdrawn. He's trying to figure out his place in the world. He's still dealing with all the turmoil of coming to terms with the fact that yes, Valentine raised him, but is not biologically his father, but yet Valentine still hurt him in many ways in a father capacity. We have apparently loads of people trying to hurt or kill Simon. So it feels like Simon is finally taking more of a front and center, fleshed out role in this series. I said he becomes more of a prevalent character who interacts with other characters other than being a supporting character for Clary and her scenes. We see that from City of Ashes onwards once he is a vampire. But we're getting some independent storylines a little bit more in this one. What's interesting is so far we've actually seen a little bit of bonding between Simon and Jace. Jace can be a lot more truthful to Simon because he's not going to hurt Simon with his truth. And I think that's very refreshing because the people Jace have known in his life, they've been his family or Clary, who is now his girlfriend. They have been very intrinsically linked in many ways, whereas Simon he's still part of this world. He's a downworlder, he's Clary's friend, but he's slightly separate from it for Jace. Thus, actually, potentially, a really interesting friendship is being formed. Now we have Kyle, who, if I'm correct, whose actual name is Jordan, who appears to audition for Simon's band, and then once Simon is kicked out when his mother finds out he's a vampire, offers him a place to live. At the instant that Jace meets him, after Simon reveals that Jace hasn't really been eating, and they do their whole little supermarket trip where we find out Jace didn't know what a mango looks like, of course. Jace first thing goes, interesting, Simon didn't tell me his new roommate is a werewolf. And we kind of see in that just interaction, protective of Simon in the way that he's protective of anyone he considers his inner circle. I think he will deny till he's blue in the face that him and Simon are actually friends. But we're seeing that whether it's from circumstantial need or not, they are growing closer together. Perhaps in the very essence of the fact that they can build a relationship based on raw truth. We see this even in Simon. He doesn't like feeding around people, but even he says, but it's just Jace. It doesn't really matter what I look like in front of Jace. I guess their relationship at first was built on animosity, but there was also a level of appreciation for each other in wanting to keep Clary safe. And that duty they almost had to each other through virtue of Clary has meant that they are bonded together, but they have a greater ability for truth between them because, like I say, they don't necessarily have direct emotional attachments to one another, thus creating the opportunity for friendship. I'd like to see some vulnerability in male friendships. We might get to see it here. Of course, Jace, my boy, is going through it, and Clary obviously is very worried about the fact that he's not saying anything, he's pulling away, but Jace has just come back from the dead. He was killed by the man that raised him for the first 10 years of his life. Plus, he's dealing with these intense nightmares about Clary being harmed and harming Clary himself. To love is to destroy, and to be loved is to be the one destroyed. We're seeing he's a little bit more willing to open himself up in that capacity. We see personified in that nightmare that he says is reoccurring, we see is reoccurring, that his greatest fear is his love harming Clary, and thus he's pulling away slightly. He's just dealing with so much, and obviously Clary's the only one who knows. He came back from the dead. He has no way to properly process that because he doesn't want to burden Clary with all of this complexity and all of this darkness. I think in many ways he'd like to think they're free from the turmoil they've just been in. Let's focus on training Clary, let's focus on spending time together, let's not focus on his emotional baggage, forgetting, because Shadowhunters aren't the best when it comes to thinking about their own mental well-being or mental health in general, they're kind of forgetting that they need to recover from what they've been through. And for traumas the size of Jace's, recovering is not just throwing yourself headfirst into training and patrolling again, even though we know that is something Jace prides himself on. He prides himself on being an amazing shadow hunter, a great soldier, he also hides behind it. His instinct is to hide behind personifying himself into a weapon, and where he can't do that with his words to distance people like Clary, because he does want to keep them close, even if he fears his love destroying them, he can do that in throwing them both into training in an idea of trying to protect themselves from that harm. All of these choices, all of these actions, they're building up this re-traumatized Jace, because in many ways I think the interactions at the end of City of Glass with Valentine, instead of necessarily being new trauma, they just added and opened old wounds that were the trauma of his childhood with Valentine. Also, this far we have no clue what physical or mental effects being brought back from the dead by an angel will have. There's a lot going on in 145 pages in this. Like I say, it's a reintroduction to all of our characters. It's a reintroduction to what the world is and how it functions now that the antagonist, the threat of the first 3 books, which was Valentine, is no longer present. But yet we're dealing with the fallout, and that's what this first 145 pages has very much been. I love that we're getting these moments. So Jace and Kyle just playing video games when Simon sneaks off to meet Luke. Simon comes in and he genuinely is showing concern for Jace, right? He's saying you should eat something, that you look really tired. Like, he's noting these things about Jace and he's being observant about it. Like, you should eat something, I'm not kidding. And Jace, he actually shows vulnerability in his answers. He's not flippant. He's not using words as weapons to push Simon away. He just gives him truth. The thought makes me sick, to be honest. Like, it's raw and it's real, and it's because Jace has never felt like he had to keep up a pretense for Simon. So we get to see a lot of Jace's truth be spoken to us through how he speaks to Simon. My dear little troubled Jace. So he's saying that he has reasons for doing what he's doing, which is distancing himself from Clary. But even in that, we see his capacity for love, and he cares so deeply for Clary that he knows in distancing himself from her, he doesn't want to be anywhere else. So it's why he's sticking to Simon, because at the very least, if he's looking after Simon, I guess in some way it aligns with Clary's agenda, which part of Clary's agenda, she wants the people she loves to be safe, and Simon is one of them. Love is a contradiction, can be tied to love is to destroy, and to be loved is to be the one destroyed. The arc of this series is they're trying to prove that ideology wrong. There's something really funny about moments where Jace is like, do you want to see a photo of Alec and Magnus in Berlin? Magnus is wearing lederhosen. When you know, after reading the Red Scrolls of Magic, that they took those photos all in Magnus's apartment because they were stopping a demon-worshipping cult Magnus founded as a joke years ago. There's something about that that's quite a funny little detail to read this book with that perspective. I stand by. In this book, even though Jocelyn is awake, so far, it still feels like Luke is her parental figure. Luke is the most fleshed out parental figure we have. And also, I just don't know how to take Jocelyn. I still have a lot of reservations about what she did with Clary's memory, about the fact that she kept the shadow world a complete secret from her, despite it being an imminent threat. She had no backup plan, she had no safety plan established with Clary. I think she put Clary in a lot more danger by not giving her any way to defend herself were this imminent threat to appear. Hiding things from your kids does not protect them from them, it just makes them naive to the realities when they encounter them. So essentially, Camille and Raphael both have a very similar story, but are placing the blame on one another for the killing of humans. Now, I feel like we have proven before, Camille is not necessarily someone to be trusted. Maureen. I remember Maureen has something to do with something. She's a vampire, right? No, apparently Simon is drinking from Maureen. Wait, is this how she becomes a vampire? But she needs blood, vampire blood. Simon, what are we doing? Why are we losing control? Right, we made it to 190, which is chapter 9. I am going to relocate, I'm going to make some toast, and then we'll regroup. I love that we've created like this motif that Isabel just keeps stumbling upon Jace and Clary when they're making out. Jace just keeps losing his control and going and kissing or wanting to be close to Clary and then pushing her away, and it's this back and forth, and honestly I feel like Jace just needs a little bit of therapy. Our Simon, he has learnt that you don't date two honestly quite terrifying women at the same time without telling them about each other, especially when they know each other.
She wrote you a letter so you wouldn't forget her. Wish I could care less. It isn't my place to know what it says. My heart is a front page. It won't act its own age. It aches as it bends, folds at the edges. I'm out of my head.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. I think we have something like 170-ish pages left of this book and it's still the morning. I think we're going to get this done in daylight hours, everyone. So we're starting on page 260. Just revealed that Camille and Magnus used to be together, which we just saw in the Infernal Devices. I have a coffee that I just made. Let's dive right in.
It aches as it bends, folds at the edges. I'm out of
Both
my
Simon and Magnus are having romantic troubles with their Lightwood siblings.
Say that we're fine and all, 'cause we are. But where's that confidence?
Don't get between Malik. No. Brother Zachariah. Jem. Old ties exist between the Herondales and the brothers. We owe him help. Jem, you think you owe him help because he's Will's descendant. Those old ties are you loving your parabatai. Oh. I feel like I'm picking up on so many little things because I'm reading this after I've reread the Infernal Devices. Someone had carved the letters JG into the stone just above the bedstead in the cells of the Silent City. Jessamine Grey, when she was in the cells, it's these little details. I love it. The last time he was in the Silent City, he was wrongly imprisoned because of Valentine. And now his secret that he came back from the dead has been revealed, which we don't know what the consequences are going to be of that one, and them finding out that one. But they found out that essentially his mind is completely unprotected from the protection Shadowhunters usually have because he's essentially been reborn. And so he must stay in the Silent City where he literally has trauma of seeing the Silent Brothers be murdered. Isabel Lightwood goes from not knowing how to have female friends to literally warning Simon and Jordan, don't go near Maya, she looks hot as hell. If I was into women, obviously I would go for her. Neither of you are allowed near her. You've been warned. And that is the protectiveness we love to see. Okay, I wasn't going insane. Wolsey Scott is who founded the Praetor Lupus because he was talking about the Praetor Lupus in the Downwelder Inn when Will saw him on the way to Wales. Why we gotta bring greater demons into this? Like, Lilith, why are you here? This feels really culty, is what this feels like. It feels culty. Ew, ew, ew. Never believe anybody is actually dead until you see a body. I know there's all this dramatic Lilith stuff happening, but Izzy flinging herself at Simon, we love an admittance of how important this man is to you. Thank you. Thank you, Izzy. This description of Alec, there was something different about him these days, Clary thought. A surety about him he hadn't had when she had first met him. Something that allowed him to be generous with others as he had never been generous with himself before. It's funny, when you don't accept identity, it's like growing up with a constant earthquake and then finally finding solid ground, finally finding solid footing, and almost so many more things about yourself and your personality slot into place. There is a reason we say Luke is the best parental figure any of them have. He comes in after everything's going down. The Shadowhunters have swarmed. Jocelyn only wants to know where Clary is. And he puts a hand on Simon's shoulder and asks, "Are you okay, Simon?" Luke may not have fathered any of them, but he's the father that stepped up. For a bachelor who never had children, Simon thought Luke had an awful lot of kids to look after, right? Hello, lovelies. We have finished reading City of Fallen Angels. I finished it earlier this afternoon and then dove headfirst into the beginnings of editing my Infernal Devices vlog, which I think is going to take me a fair bit of time, but I really enjoyed this book. I feel like in my brain it was a filler book before, but what it actually magnificently does is it deals with the fallout of City of Glass whilst keying up the narrative arc for this half of the series. Whilst Clary might be the main character of this series as a whole, I think the main characters of this book specifically were Simon and Jace, because we see their friendship growing together. Like I've said before, I think Simon is someone Jace can show a lot of honesty and vulnerability with, because he's never had to throw up that mask around him. What that led us to is we're seeing Jace going through it. We are seeing that Jace is having these nightmares about harming Clary. Later, when he actually tells Clary about this, obviously we find out this is due to a type of possession. When he died and came back, when the angel Razil brought him back, all of those protections placed on Shadowhunters when they're born would have been removed, because he was essentially reborn. So he's been vulnerable to exploitation by the demon world. And Lilith, she took hold right away. She's gone into his brain and found all of his worst fears and has weaponized them against Jace. I mean, his greatest fear is to love is to destroy. He was taught that to earn Valentine's love, it was through manners of pain and hurt and abuse, and supposedly it was with the intent to make Jace stronger, supposedly from a good intent, right? But this means, I think, that Jace has such a complex relationship with love, and he likes to think that love can be soft because he's seen it from the Lightwoods, yet he's still having this real hardship with marrying these two fags. It's a bit like the fact that he's having a hardship marrying himself in a nature versus nurture debate. He by nature is Stephen Herondale's son. By nurture, he's Valentine's. He never knew his biological father. He was raised by Valentine, and thus trying to figure out who is he as a person, who influenced who he has become. And if Valentine had him in his formative years, is being with the Lightwoods as long as he has that given enough to him to help override the lessons and influence of Valentine? He's really grappling with all of these facts. I think it's really the after effect of having ignored so many traumas that have happened one after another in his life, and his brain has reached a breaking point which left him completely vulnerable to Lilith's manipulation, alongside the fact that his brain was literally cracked open without protection by coming back from the dead. So we have this inner conflict that is very in keeping with the character development that we know of Jace. This is why his reactions to the nightmares of harming Clary that are being sent by Lilith, why his wanting to keep them a secret and trying to work through them himself, and having these questions about nature versus nurture that he's trying to deal with and come to terms with, they make a lot of sense in the narrative arc of Jace himself, and thus, whilst they also serve the purpose of keying up what will become Sebastian coming back to life and the Sebastian villain arc of this book and the subsequent two books in the Mortal Instruments, that isn't produced by making Jace react in a way that's out of character. And that's the important thing for me. I think a lot of writers create these big swings and almost forget the characterization they've put into their characters, or alter them very rapidly without really exploring that. But what Cassandra Clare has done brilliantly with Jace here is creating a narrative arc that can also marry up with the processing, the trauma, and the development we know Jace to be going through. On the flip side, we then have Simon. Simon said, I'm the main character here because loads of people want to kill him. He literally has Lilith's cult coming after him, and the only reason that he's safe is because of the mark of Cain on his head. Spoiler alert, that mark of Cain then gets used against Lilith herself. We also have Simon reckoning with finding out more about what it means to be a vampire. We have these other characters coming into the fold of our main characters. So Maya's been brought further into the fold, Jordan's being brought in, and obviously, like I said, Simon's taking more of a front seat as the driving force of this, because Camille wanted him, Lilith wanted him. He's very popular. It's also really funny to me reading this after reading the Infernal Devices and the Red Scrolls of Magic. I like making little comments about dealing with cults before. When you read this ordinarily, you just think, oh, this must be a Shadowhunter thing. But when you read it after reading the Red Scrolls of Magic, you go, oh, yes, because Magnus founded a joke cult and then it became a real cult, and you just dealt with that on your European vacation, of course. And Will getting mentioned, and of course brother Zachariah appearing for the first time, our gem. There's so many things that are important to bring into this to set up the next two books, but it does it without forgetting all of those loose threads that were left at the end of City of Glass. And also we're setting up a lot of relationship things in this one as well. Relationships between our characters romantically, but also relationships in terms of the Downworlders and the Shadowhunters. Obviously the Shadowhunters now have Downworlder seats on the council, but we're seeing Simon reckon with the fact of, will he ever be treated the same way as Shadowhunters treat each other because he's a Downworlder? Will he be considered ever as truly part of them? We see Alec reckoning with the fact that he is mortal and Magnus is immortal, and also reckoning with the fact that he has had many partners because he is quite old. The political aspects of Shadowhunter and Downworlder relations, but how it impacts personal relationships as well. I really enjoyed this book. If you will, it's a great place to start part 2 of the Mortal Instruments series. Now with that covered, we're going to jump in to City of Lost Souls. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life, and we are starting reading A City of Lost Souls. I have you at a terrible angle, so I have to be all the way back here to actually talk to you, and I have just unbuttoned my jeans because I forgot how much I hate wearing high-waisted jeans with a belly bar in. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. I actually didn't start reading last night. I did get a little bit of editing done. We're just a little bit behind in everything. We've been applying for some jobs. We've got a lot going on, but we're going to start reading today, and I'm excited about this. Like I said, City of Fallen Angels really surprised me. There was a lot more in there that I think I overlooked the first time I read it. So I'm excited to see if the same can be said for City of Lost Souls. 2 weeks. 2 weeks since the rooftop, 2 weeks since Sebastian's come back, 2 weeks since he bound himself to Jace, and Jace is missing. 2 weeks. This is going to be a roller coaster. We finally have a good console at least. Gia Penhallow both lets Clary off, doesn't punish her, because why would she, and actually wanted to continue the search for Jace and Sebastian. She got vetoed, but she wanted to. We like when people actually have the best interests of these children at heart. I love brother Zachariah also being one of the people wanting to keep the search at full strength. He just feels such a sense of duty to the Herondales, doesn't he? Ah, Jem, your parabatai is showing. Helen and Eileen, fancy seeing you here. Are we going to see them interact with Magnus and Alec? That's the question. Baby Julian. He seems so innocent here. And then we get to Lady Midnight where he's drowning in responsibility. A silent brother was present, someone sworn to secrecy, and a female warlock who took the place of the Iron Sister. Jem and Tessa? I feel like it was Jem and Tessa. Was it Jem and Tessa? Apparently this isn't a chill everyday outfit in my town. Okay, we are on day 2 of reading City of Lost Souls. I don't know how much I've actually updated you in my reading journey because I have felt ill for a lot of the past few days. I have not had makeup on, I've not had my hair done. Don't need those things to film. I just feel more like me when I have them. Anyway, it was a dark, rainy, and very autumnal day today, so we did get some reading done. We are at page, bear with. We are at chapter 11, page 238. So we made a decent effort at getting into this one. Let's quickfire what we know. So Jace went missing from the roof when Sebastian rose and bound them by blood. What we figured out by that, it means that they are essentially a twinned pair. But unlike the parabatai bond, this does not leave them with free will. This creates a primary and a subordinate pair. So Sebastian is the primary and Jace is the subordinate, which essentially means that Jace believes in everything that Sebastian says. A little bit like Clary's mind block works, he can see and interpret things that are happening around him, but they will get glossed over by his brain to suit the narrative that works for Sebastian and works with how Sebastian thinks. So whilst he is technically seemingly a willing participant going along with whatever Sebastian is doing, he isn't. He is essentially possessed, even though that's not technically what's happening. He is still under the influence of another. It's been 2 weeks since the end of City of Fallen Angels. A lot has happened. The Clave cleared Clary of any wrongdoing by raising Jace from the dead again with the Angel Razil, because essentially she didn't raise the Angel, but she just stopped Valentine being able to destroy the world, and instead got the wish herself, which I mean, to be fair, you can't fault her. What else would she have done in this situation? They were searching for Jace, but wards have now been compromised elsewhere that keep literally the whole world safe. So the Clave has reprioritized. That does not mean our group of wayward Shadowhunters, as Magnus would put it, have reprioritized. They are still searching for Jace. In fact, Clary decided to contact the Seelie Queen to try and strike a favor, get a deal, to essentially try and figure out where Jace is. She had to steal these fairy rings from the Institute to do this. She had to deliver them to the Seelie Queen. Doesn't do that, keeps them for herself, and they are allowed two people to talk in their minds to each other across time, space, and apparently dimensions. Because we've gone whole Marvel Cinematic Universe on this one, and now we're doing dimensional pocket stuff. To be fair, it isn't as sci-fi as it sounds. Jocelyn seems to be doing a little bit more in this. I just feel like we haven't actually developed Jocelyn Frey or Fairchild, or is she Garraway now? I don't think they actually have got married. I think they've postponed. Don't feel like we've actually got enough time with her to develop her character, whereas everyone else wasn't asleep for the first 3 books, so we've got to know their characters quite well. Even Jordan, who we only met last book, and Maya, who we only met in City of Glass, I think, or properly met in City of Glass, they're more fleshed out. Obviously, Simon, his daylighter plights going on. Raphael asked him to be his bodyguard because Camille's still on the loose, and Camille, is she on the loose? Clary cooks up a plan to go with Jace and Sebastian because they appeared at Luke's house to go after her to try and get her to come with them. And then Jocelyn sees Sebastian, which was not a fun family reunion. Luke got stabbed. There's so much that's happened. Alec's insecurities are definitely being explored in the Camille situation, but yet we still do get to see him having a lot of comfort in Magnus, and Magnus's loft being a place where he doesn't have to act defensively. He doesn't have to be the big brother or the protector or the warrior. He can just be Alec. And I think we see that most when, after Jocelyn and Clary and Izzy have all come to Magnus's loft and Simon comes after Izzy, Magnus literally has Alec asleep on his lap on the sofa, and it's such a moment of tenderness between the two, a moment of comfort and comfortability, which defines their relationship so nicely. What's interesting to me is we seemingly are getting a lot of different perspectives, but all that feel a lot more tied together than they have previously. We always get to see different things and different storylines that are occurring within the novels, but this one, it feels like we're following different people in different places, but all contributing towards one plan and one goal that's already been fleshed out for us, which makes it all feel a little bit more cohesive than perhaps we've otherwise seen. We don't follow Jace's perspective specifically because until Clary joins Jace and Sebastian, nobody knows where they are, and they're in this apartment that can move around because it's in a pocket dimension. Like I say, we go very multiverse, but it just emphasizes that Jace, the Jace we know, the Jace we've been in the mind of, the Jace we know the psychological wounds of, Jace we know the loyalty and love of, he's not the Jace at the wheel right now. And then we have the Jace that we've grown to know almost haunting the narrative in his absence. Everything's being done to try and find him, but he's not actually in the narrative at all. It's a very purposeful choice on Cassandra Clare's part. We've got so much action going on in here, and we are setting up for a big finale. You can feel it, and you can feel the weight of that. It's like we're getting all of the chess pieces into the right positions to make an attacking play. That's what this book feels like so far, and I think that is much of what this book is. This book is entirely the setup to then lead to City of Heavenly Fire. Anyway, I've chatted. This is a 15-minute long clip. I'm not going to have fun editing this, so let me get back into reading. We'll see how much we get read, and I'll update you later. It's a new day. I washed my hair today. I finally feel like a human after being ill. Well, it's more I was in the beginning stages of a cold for so long, and I just kind of got sick of feeling sick. So I got dressed and I showered and I washed my hair to try and make myself feel better. We didn't quite get to the makeup today, but we tried. We are reading City of Lost Souls. I'm doing a quick little how many pages can I read in an hour for TikTok, because I find when I've been in a little bit of a slump, which Yes, it was maybe for 24 hours, but it felt like a slump because I had no energy because ill. I find that doing like an hour of straight reading, how many pages can I read? It really helps my productivity. You can see my laptop sliding with a timer on it here. What made me really laugh is we've read one chapter today so far. So we're at page 295, chapter 13. We have officially declared Team Good and Team Evil. Team Evil is Jace and Sebastian, really just Sebastian, but Sebastian's influence on Jace creating Team Evil. Where Clary is. Team Good, the ones that raised a demon. I think the lines between good and evil in single actions getting a bit blurred. The greater good as a cause, still fine. I think of myself as a freewheeling bisexual. Of course. Yesterday, I finished City of Lost Souls. I have thoughts. So obviously there's so much that goes on in this book that brilliantly sets up the magnitude of the battle, of the war that we're going into in City of Heavenly Fire. And that is going to be the war. This is kind of the setup of everything. I can see where some people might think at certain parts this book may drag, because so much of it is building up what's going to come. And we do that first and foremost by setting up Sebastian as a character. Before, we've seen him as kind of an extension of Valentine, but in here we seem to actually build Sebastian as a person himself. What we actually get is someone who is abhorrent and slightly psychopathic. There's something really interesting about the relationships we see between Sebastian and Jace and Sebastian and Clary. So Clary obviously is only with Sebastian and Jace to try and find a way to help Jace, to rescue him, to save him. That is a relationship of love. Clary and Jace is always a relationship of love. Even when Jace is being bound to Sebastian, he still is capable of loving Clary. He still thinks about what is best for her, even if there's some realities about Sebastian that his brain is actively working not to acknowledge. A bit like how Clary's did when she couldn't see the shadow world. Literally, it's slipping over some of the realities that don't adhere to his idea or Sebastian's idea of what is right and wrong. But at the end of the day, his love for Clary still means he protects and cares for Clary to the best that he can. The relationship in turn that we see between Clary and Sebastian does not love Clary. He wishes for her to be with him because she is his sister, but what he has learned is not how to love. It's a wish for control and ownership. He wants Clary to belong to him like he wants an army to belong to him, like he has control over Jace. That is what is the bond between Sebastian and Jace. Even if it seems like there's camaraderie or friendship, it's never real. It's never actually there. What is actually there is Sebastian's will as seemingly the dominant pair in their bond. And some of this goes back, right, to how we know Sebastian and Jace grew up. So we have it noted that Sebastian literally has the raised marks of being whipped on his back, which is how Valentine treated him growing up. We know already that Valentine treated Jace and Sebastian as experiments, the light versus the dark. So Jace, whilst his experience with Valentine was one of hurt and one of abuse, he was taught to love is to destroy and to be loved is to be the one destroyed. Even within that, he had a weird sense of being loved by Valentine, of being treated with some kind of fatherly affection, which is why I think Jace finds it really, really hard to reconcile the person who raised him for 10 years with the monster that was Valentine, and in turn reconcile the parts of him that mirror Valentine from being taught how to fight, walk, write, learn languages from Valentine, versus the parts of him that mirror someone who literally killed him, drove a sword through his heart, someone who harmed him, who made him feel unworthy of love, someone who inevitably meant that Jace kept himself at a distance from everyone who tried to show him care. I mean, at the end of the day, Valentine is the reason that Jace personified himself into a weapon, right? Whilst Jace tried to personify himself into a weapon in his words, in his actions by being the greatest warrior, he still had all of those feelings underneath. He still was able to love and fear. He felt hurt. He felt connection to others. Sebastian is what happens when none of that is there. Sebastian was raised to be a warrior, raised to be ruthless and vicious and cunning, strategic, but he was not taught any of the love, nor does he seem to have the capacity for it. He is able to control and manipulate not love. In essence, the things that make us human, Jace has them and Sebastian does not. And that is no more evident than when we see them next to each other. Because even though the Jace we've come to know is at a distance, we still see the glimpses of him coming through in how he acts with Clary versus how we see Sebastian acting. Even when Sebastian is the controlling will of Jace, there is something innately human that remains with Jace. This extends even to the fact that once he is the real Jace again for a moment, he wishes to go and sacrifice himself to the Clave, knowing they will most likely kill him, in order to serve the greater good of the Shadowhunter mission. He sees it as an honour and his duty as a Shadowhunter, because his honour and duty is to serve as a Shadowhunter. It's to protect mundanes against threats and demons. He believes in that mission, versus Sebastian only cares about his own desires, thus making allegiances with demons, with anyone, if it means the downfall of Shadowhunters. Because this is what we learn when we have the Dark Shadowhunter army rising. He does not even care for that army. It's not about the army itself. It's about trying to destroy Shadowhunters with their own kind, with people that have the faces of people these Shadowhunters care about. It's an emotional gut punch from someone who doesn't have emotions, but who knows how to manipulate those weaknesses in others. It's also interesting that we see in many ways Jace's weakness is Sebastian's weakness, which is Clary. They mirror each other in so many of these nuances. When we actually get to the writing of this book, there's something magnificently done, and it is Jace, who is usually a character we follow the perspective of in these narratives of the Mortal Instruments. His perspective is completely absent from this book, because the Jace we know is absent. He's far away. That distance is emphasized by the lack of presence of his voice within the novel. Instead, we only ever see Sebastian or Jace through Clary's eyes. And it's those little nuances in how this is structured that create impact you aren't actually aware they're creating. We feel the distance we have away from Jace, and I think you may not always realize it's because we aren't seeing through his eyes in the way we usually would. In turn, I think also the writing of this book takes a step up. We have all of those different perspectives that have been growing from City of Glass onwards. We have more perspectives that all serve different purposes within the plot. Yet, in this one, they all seem to feel like branches of a tree that do return to the same root plan and root cause, whereas sometimes in the other books, it feels like things are there just to be there and only are picked up later. In this one, it feels cohesive and linear all the way throughout, and you don't question why certain things are happening. I also like the fact that we have things like Simon doubting his relationship with Izzy, we have Jordan and Maya and their relationship featured, and Magnus and Alec. Alec don't take relationship advice from Camille. But we see all these nuances of relationships that obviously, big things happening in life, it doesn't stop the minutiae from occurring. It doesn't stop the emotions of relationships happening, and in actual fact, it often will cause greater strain or drive people closer together. The fact that we have all of those little moments in here is really representative, I think, of what these teenage characters would be going through, and is especially important to showcase in YA, to showcase the complexities of emotions felt by young people, both due to the situations in front of them and due to their lives happening alongside them. Now, I think there's a couple things that I didn't realise the significance of when I first read this. The fact that the fairy rings that Simon and Clary used to communicate with one another, those are rings that the Seelie Queen knows Clary is going to take, and thus is reporting to Sebastian what is being said through them. The Seelie Queen never specifically says she will not align herself to Sebastian, just says that he would be either a powerful ally or enemy to have. So it seeds the fact that, spoiler alert, I've started City of Heavenly Fire, it seeds the fact that we will find out the Seelie Queen aligns herself to Sebastian. Something else specifically interesting is the first 3 books in this series, the Mortal Instrument series, really specifically looked at the narrative arc of love for Jace, of his beliefs of to love is to destroy and to be loved is to be the one destroyed, of not letting down his guard, of not letting people close, of having to push Clary away because of the brother-sister thing. Jace's relationship to emotions and love is so clearly one of the big center points of books 1 through 3. What I noticed in here especially at the end where Jace is talking to Clary about their relationship and how they're better together, that to protect each other, they're better to be by each other's side than pushing each other away, trying to keep each other out of battle, etc. There's something that almost seems like acceptance of love, or an acknowledgement that love does not have to hurt, that he is worthy of love, that his life can exist with love and happiness, and that is not going to cause mass devastation. In turn, also, it doesn't mean mass devastation will stop. Those things are all very interesting in here. Now, I do in general think that these teenagers, bar maybe Jace, because he seems to be quite a good strategist, a lot of them just make quite suicidal plans and go with it. Especially Simon and Clary. Like, can we give them a strategy course, please? I'm surprised Magnus goes with it half the time. I also noted the final battle in here is the most mortal we see Magnus up to this point. When he gets injured on the battlefield, when such a big conflict for Alec has been his mortality versus Magnus's immortality, we are then faced with the fact that, yes, Magnus is immortal, but he is not invulnerable. He can still be killed. So that's really interesting. Obviously, we then get them break up. I hate the Malik divorced era. Just communicate, my people, communicate. So this just has so much good, rich stuff going on that sets us up for this behemoth. She's 700 pages. I remember when she first came out and I was walking around school with her in my hand, trying to get through her, trying to read her between classes, in registration every day, trying to get through the content. She was named the Brick. That is what she very lovingly got called, and that is still her nickname to this day for me, even though when it came to the Dark Artifices, we were just matching this energy constantly. So like I said, today I started City of Heavenly Fire. We are exactly 199 pages in, and oh my god. So I remember I sob in this one, anticipate tears. We get dropped into the action. In many ways, this feels very similar to how City of Glass starts, because we call back to a lot of images, symbols, setups that we know from that. The going through the portal to Alicante from the Institute, that is the mirroring that we're seeing, except it feels on a larger scale. The magnitude of this war feels infinitely bigger. And I think there's a reason for this. We saw how psychotic Sebastian was in City of Lost Souls, and we saw that all he cares about is his desires, his need for control, his wanting to control others. He doesn't even care how his army was being slain in the battle at the end of City of Lost Souls, because he can just create more of an army. And that's what we see him trying to do in the beginning of this book. We get introduced to Emma and the Blackthorn kids. I instantly fall in love with them. I forgot how much I adore them. So I was the same age as Emma when I read this. It was a big pull for, I think, why I was so engaged with this book, because I felt a type of myself reflected in Emma. Now, reading this at 23, what's interesting to me is we have followed these teenagers through the 5 books up to this. We are entering a war. It's not unusual for us to study wars and find out that 16, 17-year-olds were allowed to enlist, to find out that slightly younger teenagers enlisted, whether it was through faking documents, going with older siblings, whatever. It's a travesty when they die, but it's not an unknown part of war, because they fight. By introducing these children as the first victims of this war, as the first ones left living from an attack of this war that we see in this book, we are instantly told this is going to be a ruthless war. Whenever we talk about war, it's always interesting to think about the people left behind to rebuild. So often, it's those too young to know that much loss. The people who did not fight at all. So often the ones who live to carry the burden of a war are the ones who could not fight at all. We are instantly being introduced to the reality that children are the ones who know the effects of war by instantly introducing us to Emma and the Blackthorn children. Their father is taken by Sebastian's army and their brother is kidnapped by them, and every other adult shadow hunter in the Institute is either killed or turned to Sebastian's army, by leaving the only survivors, these children, and thus making them the victims of war that we see carried throughout this book from page 1. We see that this is not just a war that will affect those who fight in it, it is a war that will affect everyone. Now, I talked about the Seelie Queen aligning herself in some way with Sebastian in City of Lost Souls because of the dealings with the ring. We see this again foreshadowed in the prologue when Sebastian says that he will not turn Mark because of his fairy blood. Now, at first, it's a question of, does he have a problem with Downworlders, not wanting them in his army, even though Shadowhunter's blood is dominant? But we know he is not Valentine. He doesn't dislike Downworlders, he dislikes Shadowhunters. He wants to eradicate Shadowhunters. So why would he not turn Mark? Why would he kidnap him instead? It is because of his fairy blood. We wonder whether he does not want to antagonize the Seelie Queen. Sebastian is in the bed of the Seelie Queen. Meliorn comes in, who is the representative of the Fairfolk on the council, and recounts what the Shadowhunters know and their plans to them, thus leading to Sebastian to strike on another institute, which was the London Institute, only to find out that they're better defended than was first anticipated. Am I hearing Jessamine for the win? But that then leads him to attack the Praetor Lupus. And thus, not even 150 pages into this book, we have our first main character death, which is Jordan. Now, I remember at the time it was noted by Cassandra Clare that very early on there's a main character death, and I wondered whether is Jordan actually a main character. But from his introduction in City of Fallen Angels, we see him become part of this group of teenage Shadowhunters and Downworlders. He is part of the inner circle of them because he's Simon's protector. He becomes a perspective character that we follow. He becomes someone we root for in his relationship with Maya. So he definitely exists in a main character capacity. Again, the fact that our first main character death is within the first 150 pages of this book suggests the magnitude of deaths to come, the magnitude of battle, the extent to which this is insignificant in the grand scheme of what will come towards the end of this book and the devastation to come. And to top it all off, Maureen decided to essentially kidnap Simon. Somehow we slowly see all of our Downworlders that didn't go to Alicante originally are making their way there. We have Raphael and Simon. Magnus is making his way there. Are we going to get some declarations of love to the Lightwood children? If memory serves, we definitely do. The other thing I've really noticed in this, and I've said this before, the Shadow World exists just beyond what we can reach in the world we know. So it is both familiar and distanced enough that we are able to have some interesting conversations about political ideology without getting bogged down in the discussions happening in our specific world. What's interesting when we look to Sebastian, how he's been built up, is an egotistical leader who only cares about his own desires, who does not care for his followers, who will infiltrate their free will, who will impose his will upon them like a dictator. And it's discussions of what matters in the politics of war, in allyship and freedom, in wanting the eradication of specific groups of people, like Sebastian wants the eradication of Shadowhunters, in the exact same way that Valentine wanted the eradication of Downworlders. In a weird, twisted way, Valentine at least had logic behind his desires, versus Sebastian just deems that Shadowhunters and Shadowhunter society in general have wronged him. Thus, he wants to destroy them. We've just seen this battle at the Adamant Citadel. Jace got injured. Just fire. Sebastian stabbed him, and the heavenly fire went up that sword, burned his hand, and is just spilling from a wound. He burned Brother Zachariah when Brother Zachariah attempted to heal him. What's going on with the fire in this man's blood? We're at page 199. We're going to dive back in and see how much we get read today. I genuinely think this is one of, if not the best book in the Mortal Instruments series. I am both happy and not sure I'm emotionally prepared to have got to this point. Today on Jace, your Herondale is showing. Look, you can either bring me to Brother Zachariah or I can wander around yelling for him until he turns up. Also, then I think it's Brother Enoch telling Jace, you are a great deal of trouble, Jace Herondale. Does this not remind us of someone else about 130 years in the past? I've drawn so many parallels between Jace and Will. Even to the point that Jace tries to personify himself into a weapon because he thinks to love is to destroy and love is pain, and he doesn't think himself worthy of true love, so he tries to push people away from him. He doesn't think himself deserving of love, and he doesn't want to harm other people with his love if to love is to destroy. If the thing that he loved as a child, a falcon, got killed, he doesn't want to risk others being harmed, and he doesn't want to accept love because his love growing up was being abused. Will thinks he has a curse on him that means that he puts on this facade. He becomes a showman and reckless and carefree, talks about debaucherous adventures he's gone on to try and push others away to stop them from caring for him, even though he himself loves deeply. Now, the tying factor of these two men that are two sides of the same coin is the fact that Herondales love deeply and largely and with an intense amount of loyalty. Like I've said before, the defining factor that literally separates Jace and Sebastian is the fact that Jace grew up with love. Instantly, Jace wants to go and see Brother Zachariah. They take him to see Brother Zachariah, and the thing is, he isn't a silent brother anymore. This is Jem. We don't get told that he is Jem once again, that is his name again. That's not revealed yet. But he is back to being Jem. He only looks a couple of years older than Jace now. He has aged minutely. He is Jem. With his humanity back, the heavenly fire he absorbed from that wound on Jace, it burned out what made him a silent brother, but it also burned out that which was killing him, because silent brothers become suspended in the state at which they become a silent brother. So his yin-fen addiction and the sickness associated with it couldn't continue to kill him, but it was still inside of him. The heavenly fire cured him of it because it was demonic in nature. Jem, Brother Zachariah, is surprised that Jace comes looking for him. Brother Zachariah, Herondales. I had almost forgotten. No other family does so much for love or feels so much guilt for it. Don't carry the weight of the world on you, Jace. It's too heavy for even a Herondale to bear. And this, again, is the conflict Jace has been having with himself from day one, and it's why he has often tried to push away love, because he both harbours such a capacity for it and feels such a guilt associated with it when his love is the reason others come to harm. It's a really lovely way of recognising these links that associate Will and Jace as Herondales, and it also tells us that Cassandra Clare, she hasn't done this by accident. She is completely aware she has done this, and it is purposeful. Also, we know in City of Fallen Angels, City of Lost Souls, and in this one, Jem, Brother Zachariah, he has still had an allegiance to the Herondales, and that is why he has almost been overseeing Jace in this capacity. Also, side note, so completely, I would love if we could get rid of Sebastian, please. That's just my little request. Like, literally the entire purpose of this book. But like, can we get to that bit? Because he is red flag, creepy, bro, that's your sister, step away levels of weird right now. I'm ever so slightly dazzling myself. All right, it is a new day and we have been reading. We are at page 377, that is chapter 14, and it is the start of part 2 of this novel. That is The World Inverted. We're in hell. What I find really interesting is the pieces of this world that obviously I'd already put together. We hear Meliorn, I believe, refer to the Seelie Queen as my beautiful one, which is what Sebastian referred to someone in a letter as, which Clary read as romantic intent. It was in fact the Seelie Queen. Of course, we'd already seen that the Seelie Queen had been telling Sebastian of what Clary and Simon talked about with the fairy rings. We'd seen that Sebastian spared Mark from becoming endarkened and kidnapped him instead in order to gift him to the hunt, the Fae hunt, the World Hunt, that's their name, because the Seelie Queen views him as part Fae as hers. It's taken Clary this long to discover that obviously the Seelie Queen has aligned herself with Sebastian. Sebastian practically told her this last book, but because Meliorn was the Fae representative, they didn't think the Fae could lie. Turns out he's only half Fae. He can lie. They believed them when they shouldn't have. And Chloe realizes this is why the Seelie Queen wanted her to help with a favor to get the fair folk representative on the council to be Melion, because he can lie. Now obviously we saw him in action lying to the Downwelder council representatives as he, I believe, drugged them in some way to then drag them to where Sebastian is hiding out. Now there's these little other things we've known. He can't be tracked. In other dimensions you can't be tracked. They literally disappeared into a crack in the earth at a site that is on ley lines where untracked and untraced soldiers appeared out of nowhere, which all points towards the fair folk. I think this is something, and the Seelie Queen notes this, there is honor is in the Shadowhunters, which has always made them uninteresting to her, but I also think it's their humanity, because the fair folk, they live forever. Time works differently. They don't seem to realize she does not hold the same honor codes that humans and shadow hunters do. They forget that the fair folk have survived this long by aligning themselves with who they view to be the winners. And the Seelie Queen has been playing a long game to align herself with Sebastian, who she views is going to be the winner of this battle. It's why she so happily escorts our group of wayward shadow hunters to the portal to hell. She doesn't believe they're going to come back. I remember this being the book where I fully realised the Seelie Queen is a dislikable character. She's not just chaotic, she doesn't just play games, she's not just cunning, but she is cruel and only cares for her own self-interest, and that is where we realise she has aligned herself with Sebastian, although she notes. The Queen wondered idly if he thought of the two of them the way she did, lovers who, even when embracing, each held a knife to the other's back, ready to stab and to betray. Because obviously we know, we've seen, Sebastian has literally been in the Seelie Queen's bed. They are both war allies because they are already in war, as much as the adult Shadowhunters may not like to acknowledge it, but they do have some kind of sexual intimate relationship, whether they are just waiting for who betrays who, of course, because in many ways the Seelie Queen and Sebastian are alike. They only care about their own interests. They play chess with other people in order to improve their own outcomes. They sacrifice pieces to win the game overall, and they will very, very willingly sacrifice each other if it means they achieve their own personal goals. Obviously, we are going after Raphael, Magnus, Jocelyn, and Luke. I feel like in this 3-book arc, Luke is more sidelined than he was in the first 3 books of this series, because then he was essentially our only parental figure we were seeing. He was the leader that was the best leader we had. I mean, there's other developments. Maya is now pack leader. Mark Blackthorn, we come to learn, is definitely with the Wild Hunt, and he cannot leave now. There's so much going on and I'm obsessed with it. I think the first time round I was just trying to wrap my head around what was happening in these books, but now I can see how everything is linked, how we foreshadowed certain things, how we might be leading up to certain things I remember happening but don't quite remember how we get there. I'm seeing the genius of how everything is crafted, and it's so much fun. We are at page 504, which this is chapter 19, page 504, and we've essentially just massively backtracked because essentially they are in hell, which they've realised is a mirror dimension to their world. Yes, that's very much giving Marvel Multiverse, I know, but somehow I'm understanding it better in here. The way they realise this is they have seen literally a mirror city to Alicante, except it's all destroyed and it's overrun by demons, and what was the Accords Hall, or would be the Accords Hall, has the story of what happened on the walls. What's essentially happened is this started the same. Shadowhunters were created, and at some point history diverged, and this was the reality when Shadowhunters didn't align themselves with Downwelders, when they were overrun with greed and power hungriness. This is what happens. They get destroyed by demons, by the Asmodai, because one of the princes of hell, Asmodeus, is who rules this land, who rules Edom. Now, we know from reading the Red Scrolls of Magic right there, Asmodeus is Magnus's father, but Magnus has not told anyone that. They've essentially backtracked though, because they went down into the mirror city of Alicante. They essentially get attacked by demons. Izzy gets injured. They have to portal back where they came from, which sets them back in their journey to find Sebastian. And now we've learnt that vampire blood can heal, but like vampire blood going over a wound can heal in a way that a healing rune can't, but also Simon is definitely hungry and weak. So what's going to come of that? On the flip side, we still are seeing things in Alicante, and Emma and Julian are taking a little bit more of a front seat. I think it's interesting that we can already see Julian, he is 12 years old, but how he shoulders responsibility, how he steps up without being asked. He's looking out for all of his siblings, even though he does have an older sibling, Helen, who realistically that burden, that responsibility should fall to in the absence of their uncle, who it's been said they're going to be left in the care of. But Julian shoulders it. He is the one making sure his siblings eat. He is the one taking care of them when Ty gets injured. He's the one caring and tending to Ty's wounds in the same way that almost we saw Alec doing to Jace in City of Glass, except Alec did it from a place of exacerbation as well as care, whereas Julian is just doing this from care. He shoulders responsibility like he was born with it. And it's a lot of what we would now, the discourse on eldest children and the eldest child, except he isn't the eldest child. And yet we still see these vulnerable moments. And we saw this moment when they testified in front of the council again. And brother Zachariah, Jem, looks to Emma almost with a sense of longing or regret, because that is his family. It's not his direct descendant in the family, but it is someone in his family line, and I'm interested to see them interact slightly more. We're definitely going to finish this today. I can already tell.
Not great at keeping a secret.
Clary, Jace, in a cave. Is this a Cassandra Clare thing? Like, why are they always in a cave? Also, Alec has now walked in on Simon and Izzy kissing many times. Is this a Malik thing? Is this just what they do? And Simon has now fed on Jace, Izzy, and Alec. Again, is this a Lightwood thing? Is Feed the Vampire a Lightwood thing?
Julian, he is 12 years old. You're not just my friend and I'm not just their older brother. I'm their father, or the closest thing to it, and they need me and I need you. He's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he's 12. Magnus telling Alec to name the Seraph blade he's going to use to free Magnus of his chains, Raphael, when Raphael is now dead, when we know he cared for Raphael when he was a new vampire, and when we know that Raphael was the one trying to take the chains off of Magnus unsuccessfully.
We have officially finished City of Heavenly Fire, and I have thoughts, but there are so many thoughts. Because this is such a big book, I could literally talk for an hour, so I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to talk about this book as a book of kind of two key themes. It is a book of war, obviously, but it is also a book of parallels. Let me start with this being a book of war. This is emphasised in the prologue. We are introduced to Julian and Emma and Julian's siblings, the Blackthorn children, in the prologue. Julian and Emma are 12. They have then Julian's 4 younger siblings. They are children. And yes, while we have Clary and Jace, Alec, Izzy, Simon, who are all teenagers, it is not uncommon in war, when we learn about them in history, when we talk about them now, that we see older teenagers fight in these wars. That is not seen as uncommon, let's say that. By introducing these children, we are introducing the tragedies of innocence in war. Tragedies of war are not just death. It is what comes of those left to rebuild and what comes of those who lose their innocence to war. Now, Julian is a brilliant example of this. He is 12 years old, right? His home is attacked. His father is turned. His brother is kidnapped by the fairies and ends up with the Wild Hunt. His older sister is sent away for representing something that is different, even though she is not aligned with it, due to fear after the fact of war. He is 12 years old. He must kill his own father, and then he must take on the responsibility of being the primary caregiver of his 4 younger siblings. He loses all of his innocence to the repercussions of the actions of Sebastian Morgenstern and his army. Again, we see this in Emma. She is orphaned by this war, and she takes on the responsibility of supporting Julian through this, of becoming his parabatai, because that is what they're left with. We also see not just war happening and the devastation and deaths that come of this. I mean, we have Jordan who dies, Amethyst obviously, and all of the Undarkened, which is a great, great loss. We have the Nephilim that die protecting that which is their mandate. We also have people like Raphael Raphael, who did have hope for a better future for vampires, and we have then people like Meliorn, who are on the wrong side, who we've seen betray people but we knew as a character, and that is still a loss that we have to reconcile. So we see the loss and we see the rebuilding. We see the passing of reparations and the necessity of disbanding the armies to the Sealy Court, and Magnus's argument that is this harsh punitive measures actually going to lead to recompense, or is this inevitably going to lead to further conflict down the line? These are real world questions we have around war and conflict and the politics of it, and all of them are expertly interwoven into the themes of this novel. Now, on the other side of this novel, like I say, it's a novel of parallels. In many literal ways, we have the parallel universe, what could have happened had history gone a little bit differently. We have Jace and Sebastian, who stand as parallels to one another. What could have happened if either were raised differently, if either had been in the other one's shoes, if they had got angel blood rather than demon blood, or vice versa. And we also have parallels between Sebastian and the Sealy Queen. I mean, they parallel each other's ruthless inhumanity. That's how they mirror one another, that's how they're willing to be allies with one another, but they inevitably know that they will turn on each other if the necessity comes. And we have almost this parallel of Sebastian versus Jonathan, right? When Sebastian dies, he is impaled with heavenly fire and all of the demon in him, all of the evil is burnt away. We are left with a small moment of Jonathan, the green-eyed boy who could have been had Valentine not experimented on him. And this tells us so much, right? That yes, the demon blood in him created this ruthless inhumanity that led to this war that at one point he said he was getting bored of and just changed his plans despite the devastation he is causing. We have this boy who didn't care about emotions or love but control. He did not want Clary because he loved her but because he wanted to control her, and thus didn't want anybody else to have her. Yet when Jonathan comes, he helps them destroy the Undarkened. He shows that there was goodness in there if it had been allowed to survive without Sebastian tampering with it. It is the question of what if, what could have been. And it's telling, right? It's the fact that everybody has the capacity for good and bad in them. It is the circumstances in which those things are left to thrive or die that matter, and that create ruthless inhumanity or tender care. They are the two sides of the coin we're seeing. When we also talk about parallels, when they come into Edom, what's interesting is the memory demon that plays a trick on them that tries to show them exactly what they want, their deepest desires, except it shows how the demons cannot understand humanity and emotions, and thus shows us more about Sebastian, right? Why he thinks that love is control rather than caring for what another wants. We see this evidently in what is perceived as Jace's deepest desires, because it is the people he loves in a cage and him ruling over the world like Sebastian desires. It parallels him to Sebastian, but the thing is, this isn't actually what he wants. Clary points it out. His deepest desires stem from the people he loves never being safe, and the childish part of him probably desired a world where he could control everything and keep the people he loved safe and protect them from harm. That was what was being personified, but that is not what is understood by the demon. The demon suggests that a wish to protect is a wish for control, in the same way that Sebastian seems to wish to protect Clary from the damage of this war, but in doing so he is trying to place her under his control, create her as an object of his possession. We also see this in Clary, right? What she sees is the potential if the reality of the world were different, if Valentine had been different, if he had never experimented on Sebastian and she had a caring older brother, the green-eyed boy, if they had a little sister from Jocelyn and Luke being together named after Valentine because he sacrificed himself for the Nephilim. We see this reality, yet even in this, she is with Jace, she is about to get married, and he never asked. She never had a choice in it. It removed free will from the equation. There's not an imagining of an engagement and a question. It just is. It is the reality that was always going to happen, and her free will in the case is removed. So even though it seems like everything she ever desired, it removes the humanity of choice. And this, again, it showcases why the demon in Sebastian burns away
all that is the human understanding of emotions and turns it into control. There is so much going on in this book. I cried multiple times. I cried for Raphael. I cried for Julian having to kill his father. I cried for Jordan. I cried for Clary getting rid of her brother's ashes because of the brother she could have had. Because of the brother she has to mourn that she knew could have existed but didn't because of Valentine. I honestly cannot wait to see Emma and Julian again. Like I say, I think the Dark Artifices is actually my favourite series in the Shadowhunter Chronicles, and this just made me even more excited to see Emma and Julian again when they're a little bit older. I'm so excited because in this we also present the possibility of war that is hope for a future, right? We see brother Zachariah, now just Zachariah, he's Jem again, he's with Tessa, he's with his love, and they get to look over the next generation of Herondales and Casters and Blackthorns and Fairchilds and Lightwoods. They get to care for these bloodlines all over again. We see Maya and Lily stepping in as the heads of the werewolves and the vampires in New York and taking the council seat as their representatives. We see Emma being talked about as a promising young shadow hunter, just like Jace was and is often still regarded as the best shadow hunter of his age. We see her potential there, and we also see that they're about to open the academy again, which suggests they're also creating ascended shadow hunters that need to be trained, and we see that hope for a future with Simon. The Simon of it all is where I sob in this book, and I think it's one of the greatest tragedies of this book because he gives up his immortality, something he never desired. But the trick of Asmodeus is he also takes his memories of the shadow world and thus removes him from the lives of the people who care about him, but leave them with the memory of him. That is the pain and the anguish that demons will feed off from them. They feed off emotions. And as much as Asmodeus wants to feed off the happiness of Simon's memories, he also wants to inflict this pain on the people that love him. And yet, Simon remembers these little moments when you first see that flyer that says the Mortal Instruments as the new band name. You just want to scream because he remembers things. And we get the idea that perhaps we will get Simon back, because I think all throughout the series, ever since he became a vampire, it's been seeded that Simon may eventually become a shadow hunter, right? He was always more associated with the shadow hunters than the vampires. He fought for the shadow hunters. He was often regarded as under the Clave's protection because of what he did for them. He has been aligned with the shadow hunters from day one, when he was a mundane and when he became a vampire, and thus it feels kind of full circle that we finally see him with the potential to become one. And we see Magnus and Alec come together. The divorce era ends and they agree for truth. Magnus starts to open up about his past. We see him give Alec a notebook of his life, of his stories, and we can tell by what he touches on that's in there. We also have those stories. Now the next book I'm going to do is going to be 2 of the short story collections and then The Lost Book of the White before we jump into the Dark Artifices. So this is literally the next book I'm going to dive into. I'm so excited. I love seeing more Magnus. But I think that's everything I have to say in this one. God, I just rambled. This is honestly an over 10-minute clip of me rambling. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know down below which of these books you're excited me to get to. Like, comment, subscribe, all of the things. And I will see you in the next one.